Hey, welcome to the Cybersmith channel. Today is June 28th, 2026. It is Sunday, 6:44 p.m. I just wanted to hop on here real quick to kind of chat about a thought I had the other day about something that I've been hearing a lot in the tech space, in the tech industry right now. We all know that AI is popping up and we have this bubble, yada, yada, yada. That's a whole other conversation for another day. There was a particular idea that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to kind of like expound upon, and honestly, what I wanted to refute. Where I've seen a lot of people say that because we have AI now, that coding is obsolete. That basically AI, the use of AI, is just going to replace coding, like outright. At least that's the way that I take it. And it sounds like they're basically saying that since we have AI that can produce code, there's no need to even learn how to code. That the necessity to learn how to code, which we've had for the past like 10, 15, 20 plus years, is no longer there. Now it's AI can do it, and there's no point in learning how to code. And I like definitely don't agree with this. I think that we're gonna really need coders more than ever in the future. It's gonna be very important, and I'll get into it in a minute as to like some of my thoughts on this. But the idea that we nobody needs to know how to code at all, and that it's futile or it's pointless or useless to learn how to code, um, definitely doesn't make sense to me. I feel like as long as there's software, then somebody needs to know how to code. And if only one person knows how to code, then that's obviously not going to be enough to prop up the whole industry, right? Because that's where we're trending towards. As we continue to have AI replace juniors and replace interns and things like that, we're gonna run out of people that have learned how to code, have learned how to tackle hard problems and larger problems, and gain the experience to eventually become senior engineers. And if we end up in a position where all we have are the small few dedicated seniors and a bunch of AI, that's not gonna be a good spot to be in. I guess that's the best way I could put it right now. Like that's not gonna be sustainable by any stretch of the imagination. The main reason why I say that it is, in my opinion, honestly silly to say that nobody ever needs to learn how to code, or it's pointless to learn how to code today, is because, first of all, when it comes to software development or software engineering, the coding was never the hardest part. This is a common refute that you often see when people say, somebody might say coding is pointless, and then someone else says the hard part isn't the coding. I think everybody kind of takes that as like maybe something that's more like anecdotal. But honestly, if you actually understand software engineering, which means that you understand the software engineering or the software development lifecycle, there's a whole process in creating a piece of software, and coding is like a part in the middle. It's the important part. It's relatively the largest part, but it's just one part. I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole on this software development lifecycle. Once again, that's a conversation for another day. The hard part about the job was really about building judgment, building the understanding, not just of what to code, but of what not to code, how things should be built, when things are wrong, how to determine if something's wrong, how to debug when you know there's an issue. These are things that AI can't really do well today. I don't really see them getting that much better at it in the future. And they're not even things that I think AI should be in charge of in the first place. I don't think we should rely on AI to fix all the bugs that we find in software. I mean, we see right now with what's going on with the curl repo, they're constantly being, or actually, I think as of today, they might have actually stopped even accepting pull requests because AI is just flooding the repo with PRs, some of which may not even be, not even some, most of which probably aren't even valid fixes. And it's actually hurting the space more than it's helping. And ultimately, it should be humans, it should be people that are responsible for that judgment. And the only way to build that judgment is to code. And it's maybe what we really should think about is how studying to become a software engineer should change. But to say that there's no point in learning how to code at all, period, to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the analogy that I see being used a lot when talking about why you shouldn't have to learn how to code today, people are likening this to when the car was invented. And they're saying that just like when the car was invented, we no longer needed horses. Now that we have AI, we no longer need to know how to code because AI can just produce the code for you. I think at first glance, that sounds like an analogy that makes a lot of sense because the car did make having to use a horse to travel, especially long distance, obsolete. But the issue that I have with that analogy is that it's kind of a false equivalency because it's basically likening the horse to coding. And I think moving forward, I'm not going to just call it coding. I'm going to call it software engineering because there's an entire discipline that we're talking about besides just not just writing code, but the process of implementing and deploying and delivering software. Back in whatever, let's say 1865 or whatever, when you needed to figure out how to travel somewhere from A to B and someone had a horse, they didn't teach you how to horse, right? They taught you how to ride a horse. They taught you how to travel. They taught you how to navigate. They taught you probably in some kind of like implicit way what speed and acceleration is. They might have taught you some laws or at least information of what you need to know about like things that do's and don'ts, let's just call it. And I don't think that when the car came around, those things just became obsolete, right? You may have learned how to drive. And so the physical process changed. You no longer have to mount a horse and, hope that it feels like moving so that you can travel. You now had a mechanical machine. That's redundant. You now had a machine that you could start and you could run and would go. And so that physical process may have changed. But those other characteristics that once again boil down to judgment didn't go away. You still have to know how to navigate. You still have to understand laws and the rules of the road. You still had to understand speed and acceleration. Those weren't things that went away. And I would argue that some people might say, well, having a car and driving was so easy that all it did was make it so that you didn't need a horse because the horse was way harder and the car is just way easier. I think driving seems easier because the car allowed for infrastructure to be built around it to where it was something that was much easier. And that's exactly what I think is what we're seeing today honestly, it's not something we're seeing today in software. This is software. As the times go on, things become more and more abstract, right? That's another argument we've always had is how everything is a wrapper of everything. I don't understand why people try to put that down as if that's not literally the point. Nobody wants to hand roll assembly anymore, right? Nobody wants to punch cards. Nobody wants to, a lot of people don't even want to bother with C. People are happy. A lot of these AI apps and wrappers that people have created are written in JavaScript. There's so many layers of abstraction that are being used today, and AI is just another stack on top of that. What I think people don't realize is the exact same thing happened with the car. Have you tried off-roading? Because to me, off-roading looks very hard. Off-roading doesn't look easy. Like, have you seen the rally cars, like speeding off-road and things like that? That's not easy. The reason why driving seems like it's easier than horse riding is just because of the infrastructure that was able to get more advanced. We got interstates and roads, we got traffic lights, gas stations, because, and back in the day, if your horse was tired, you had to let him rest and sit, feed him, and, eventually groom him and all of that stuff. And then don't let him die. If he dies, now you got to find another horse. But guess what? Horses are just about. So you could always go find another horse. That doesn't work with cars. So we need, gas stations. We need places to do maintenance and oil changes. All of this is infrastructure that was built up so that the car could be maintained and become our primary mode of transportation. But that didn't mean that it's easier. That complexity was abstracted out into the rest of civilization, right? We have governments and private businesses come and create infrastructure to allow that to happen. So I don't think that judgment that was needed to operate a horse was no longer needed to operate a car. I think that the end goal was the same, traveling from point A to point B. And in doing so, there's just certain things that you still need to know. And I don't think that just because someone had a horse, if they were bad at riding that horse, I don't think that meant that they were instantly good at driving a car. I'm sure that they probably still lacked a lot of the skills, and some other skills might have transferred. And I think that's the same thing that we're seeing right now. The notion that we can just throw away the skill of coding because AI can do it sounds asinine to me. Just like with the ability to understand acceleration, whether you're using a horse or a car, you need to understand like cybersecurity, whether you wrote the code or the AI did, right? You still need to understand networking, and you still need to have judgment to know whether or not the AI did a good job and whether or not you need to intervene and you need to guide the AI wherever it needs to go. The same way as just because there was a law that existed when you had that horse didn't mean that it may have necessarily been negated now that you have a car. I'm sure that if there was some kind of trafficking law with a horse, it still applies to the car, right? Because it's not about the mode of transportation in particular. It's about the actual law. It's about the actual judgment call. And that's exactly what we're seeing here with AI. And the reason why I think it's important now that we really kind of like dead this narrative that you don't need to know how to code is because as you go up in abstractions, the complexity doesn't go away. As a matter of fact, you get punished harder when you are unaware about the complexity if you don't know how to address that complexity. It's funny because like every new step of the way they say that something's going to replace programmers, and this is another talking point that we all hear and we're all arguing about. But like literally every step of the way, whether it's easier frameworks, no longer having to write assembly, what it wasn't like what is it called, UML or whatever that was. They said that was something we would no longer need to write code because now we have UML diagrams and it makes it so much easier or something. And then we had no code and low code tools. What do you need a developer for? You got Squarespace and you got all of that. And that's the other caveat is like for some people will be fine with AI. Like if you just need a Kanban board, have at it, like there's no reason you need to hire 5 devs and start planning equity for something that's simple. But if you're trying to do something more high stakes, chances are you're going to need at least one like competent software engineer, if not a whole team or even a whole department. And then like that's the reason for that is because of that cost that is still there in complexity now that you have another layer of abstraction. So something I was thinking about is like we just witnessed I can't remember if it was last year or a year ago. It's all a blur today. But like we just witnessed what happened with that CrowdStrike outage. And from what I understand, I don't even think that was code I don't think that was AI that wrote that code. I think that was a person that made a mistake and it took down the entire world. Like people couldn't fly home around the world, like not in some locality. everywhere in the world, people were stuck for however many hours, 30 hours or something. So let's say that something like that didn't occur because of just like a simple human error. Let's say instead that it was caused by an AI that, you know, in its randomness, put an error or put a bug in the code and shipped it to prod, and it's everywhere. And now some nefarious state actor can actually exploit that and purposefully bring everything down. Wouldn't you hope that there was somebody in that position that understood that code, or at least understood software well enough to address that situation? Because otherwise, what are you going to do? You're more than likely going to have to succumb to the whims of that state actor, huh? So here's the analogy that I thought of as to like why we need to keep learning how to code. We need to keep building, creating a base of the labor pool that are people that are learning how to code so that they can eventually become senior engineers like the rest of us. And then I think the analogy is, while it may not be entirely realistic, it requires some imagination. Just stick with me for a second. So imagine sometime in the not too distant future, we develop a robot that's able to perform surgeries with like 99.49s of accuracy, right? It's like state of the art, and pretty much any surgery under the sun it can complete with a handful of like some exceptions and edge cases. And then you have, you know, in this company or whatever it is, in this institution that built this robot, they have a expert surgeon on standby for those cases or those situations. The robot gets in and they're like, the robot, it hit that 0.0000028% random chance that it doesn't know what to do. Let's get this guy in. He can patch it up and, you know, fix it or carry on. Now, I'm going to assume that if you had to go under surgery and they told you that they were going to use that robot, let's say the robot's cheaper. Let's say the robot is, you know, if without the robot is 50 grand, with the robot is $5. I'm going to assume that if you were going to go under surgery for that robot and you knew that this human in the loop was going to be in that room, you're going to hope that that human is a very competent surgeon or a competent doctor. As a matter of fact, I'm going to assume that in order for this to even be a viable business like proposition, like for anybody to even attempt to do this, the surgeon would probably have to be better than the robot. How would the surgeon get any better since now that the robot can do surgeries, we don't need surgeons anymore? There's no reason to learn how to do surgery. There's no reason to learn why even learn anatomy anymore? Why learn medicine when the robot can do it? Yeah, I'm gonna assume that you're gonna want that surgeon to be probably one of the best surgeons in the world if they're available, right? You'll definitely want the surgeon to be better than the robot. I know that much. And I feel the exact same thing when it comes to AI. You know, I actually felt from day one when they announced like all these coding tools like Codex and Claude Code, I thought like they shouldn't even be accessible to juniors. I don't think anybody that is not as good as the AI should use the AI. I think that the AI should be reserved for people that are better suited to actually use its capabilities to the fullest extent. And how could you expect a junior or intern to be able to really get everything out of the AI? Instead, I feel like the AI is really watering down their ability to gain the experience that they need to eventually become the seniors that are capable of leveraging AI. In healthcare, you know, you become a better doctor by doing the cases that are probably maybe easy until you get to the point where you're able to address, maybe not cure, but treat or address pretty much anything that you come across, right? Because you built up the reps, you built up the experience, and better yet, you built the judgment that came from the lessons and failures that you gained through that process, right? I mean, we literally see it in Grey's Anatomy. Like, if you've ever watched Grey's Anatomy, what do you see? You see like the interns or whoever, the guys fresh out of nursing school. I can't remember. I haven't watched it in forever. But they're like, you have somebody that's helping them through their residency, and that doctor already knows the answer, but they have these other students and they're questioning, okay, yeah, they got a sore throat. What's going on? Like that process is very important for them to eventually get to the senior doctor's place. But instead we're saying, don't learn medicine, basically. What's the point of learning medicine when the robot can do it? And the other reason why I thought medicine and healthcare is a good analogy to think about this from is because in those disciplines, if you can't address those edge cases, that could be someone's life, right? Same thing as something like aviation. Like, okay, autopilot might work 99.5% of the time. That other 0.5% of the time, you want to make sure you have a pilot in there that knows how to take over the situation and land that plane. Like when the stakes are high, we don't have any tolerance for those edge cases and those gaps, right? And we how many hours do you have to fly before you can become a pilot? 20,000, like something super high. Years and years you have to train for that because the stakes are so high. We got to make sure that you're like, at 5 nines of capability. And I feel like software for a long time now is able to be disconnected in a sense from the lives of the end users. Like that's something that we see is like end users in some instances are just referred to by like they're just an ID. They're just you're just a view count, right? You're just a number of likes. And we have all these data points, but those data points in a sense can be dehumanizing. You're not thinking about the life. You're not thinking about the story behind what led to the data, And that type of disconnect I think allows people to not think about the fact that the decisions that you make in the code that you write can impact somebody's life. We see it in things like finance and we see it in things like healthcare, but in software, you don't see it all the time. But we have seen it before. I brought up the CrowdStrike outage. That I think there was a story there where somebody missed a funeral of a loved one or something like that because of that outage. The narratives that are used in this industry can often just take the story of humanity out of it. And I think that's something that we have to be reminded of, that, okay, so we build an AI and it's capable of doing these things, but if it can't do those things, then that may not necessarily mean that, life goes on. That could mean for some people life or death, even in software, right? We saw this with the Boeing 737 MAX software issue that caused like at least 2 planes to go down. I know that one of the things that's beautiful about technology is the fact that it's able to be used in so many different fields. That's one of the reasons why I love it so much, because in one instance, I can use it to write software for finance, and another I could write software for healthcare, and then in another I could write software for entertainment, like a game or a media company. Like I think that that's one of the beautiful things about software. But on the other hand, I think it's very important to just always remember that there are people on those clients. Those clients aren't just devices in themselves. There are people using them. It doesn't sit right with me to just say, well, this AI can do 98% of the job. Those other 2% are just, you know, the cost of doing business. Yeah, okay, sure. If you're, you know, running YouTube, or if you're running, I don't know, Tumblr, whatever, then that might be fine for you. But that can't be a sentiment that we allow throughout the industry. There are certain parts of the industry where that can't be the mentality you have, especially healthcare. Like you can't sit here and tell me you're gonna accept that robot that can't perform as well as a human. Now I'm sure that the robots, when they get in hospitals, are gonna be probably better than the average human. I have no doubt about that. It's probably gonna get there to at some point. But I don't think there'll ever be a point where that then means that no humans ever have to study medicine again. I think that that's just a ridiculous idea. There was this post on Threads. They said something similar to the tune of like, coding today is like learning how to ride a horse today. Like it's cute, but it's pointless. And like I said before, sure, if you're just doing this as a hobby, or you need something quick and dirty and you don't care how it looks, or you don't care how it operates or how it functions, it's for like a quick task, or it's something that's just for you, or it's not something you're trying to monetize, whatever the meaning, whatever it may be, as to why you know that you don't need to invest that much time and effort into it, then by all means use AI, take it as it is. Deal with, if it has issues, just deal with the issues. But the reason why I disagreed with the notion that like horse riding is just cute also had to do with the fact of the timing that we're looking at and what we're referring to. Let's think about the actual time where there was a transition from horses to cars. I don't think that just because we had cars, that meant that any and everybody should go get a car. If you never, let's say this is 1904, whatever it is, the Model T came out and all that stuff. Just because you had the ability to go buy a car, would it make a ton of sense to do that had you never ridden a horse? Like that's kind of the question that I found myself with, because like in that transition period, I'm pretty sure the people that were first going to get cars were people that had plenty of experience riding horses. And I'm willing to bet, you know, I haven't researched any of this. I'm just kind of talking off the cuff, but I'm willing to bet that at that time, at that moment in time where that transition was happening, there may have been some people that actually trained or prepared to operate a car with a horse. Like the horse was probably more accessible at the time, right? Because I don't think we had hit like full assembly line production of cars yet. Like I said, I'm pretty sure a lot of the skills transfer. So you would still probably learn on the horse, and then eventually you would get the car. And I think that if we look at it today, in this situation, you should probably do the same thing. I don't understand why just because AI is now here, you can throw any information about coding into the wind. Like you should probably still learn how to write code to prepare for AI now coming to be able to do it, right? And so I think the timing is very important. 25 to 50 years from now, sure, there may not be that many people that have to learn code through writing it by hand. I don't think that means that they don't have to learn how to code. When AI first started coming out, I had kind of like a subconscious thought that what was important for me personally to start doing was actually going further down the stack instead of further up the stack. And so I started learning Rust. I started learning about systems programming. I started understanding more about infrastructure. I had worked in on cloud platforms before, but I wanted to understand more about like what made them tick and how do you actually like develop a platform in a way that makes sense. And that was ultimately what eventually led me to build Naya, because I wanted that understanding. I wanted that skill set. But I felt like it's super important to go further down the stack to build the infrastructure that AI will now produce up the stack. And this was something else that I said on Threads. It it felt like going further down the stack was so important because, just like I said earlier, that's what makes driving easier. That's what makes driving more of a lucrative and more powerful mode of transportation. The car by itself is obviously an important piece, but the car isn't enough. You need gas stations. Like you need highways. You need a place to change your oil. You need assembly lines, right? That infrastructure abstracts away so much complexity that nobody thinks about it, and that's why they're able to make this comparison. To me, it was important to say, so what's the infrastructure that we would need for AI to make sure that you guys aren't just throwing insecure code all over the place and constantly having your Stripe API keys saved in your React front ends. I think someone like me is going to end up having to be that backup surgeon, right? So that when AI inevitably misconfigures your DNS routing or, causes race conditions all over the place, that someone like me is going to have to eventually step in to get everything back on track. Because that's the thing about abstraction. Like, the abstraction doesn't go away. The abstraction is still there. You just can't see it, and you may not understand it. But there's power and there's value in knowing and understanding that. It reminds me of something I saw, I think, where they said like a lot of the people that understood like hardware and like very low level systems, like embedded systems, and like those people were retiring out and dying out, and there's like nobody to really step in and take their place to continue moving that field forward, or not even move it forward, just maintain what's already there. And that's definitely not a good thing to have AI come at the top of the stack and start doing the same thing is just kind of like eating out the middle a little bit. The path that we're heading down, if that's the case, is not I don't think that's the right decision. I don't think that's the right move at all. I would even say it's a little foolish. The means of production changed, right? Like, yes, now AI can generate some of the code that you want, but the skill didn't go away. The skill of programming, maybe now it just looks like reading, maybe now it looks like reviewing, debugging, whatever. It may not literally be typing, just the typing of the code and putting the right syntax in the right place was never the hardest part. It was just part of the job, but it wasn't really the part of the job that like made or break whether software was even good or viable. We didn't stop needing people that understood how to navigate when we had cars and we no longer needed horses, right? We still needed people that knew how to drive. So like the skill is still needed. I don't understand why in that analogy we say that the horse is coding when it's riding the horse that's coding. The reason why driving feels so easy isn't because driving is just inherently better than riding a horse. I'm sure it probably is, but that's not the only reason. It's also because we built infrastructure around the ability to use cars to travel. And to say that you don't need to learn how to code, it's just like saying you don't need to learn how to drive, right? And so eventually, if everybody that knows how to drive can no longer drive, then who's going to drive? Because even with cars, I understand that they're becoming automated, but unfortunately, as you can see, there's still that 0.5% chance that it's not going to end well. And in those moments, I'm sure you're going to want a human that knows how to drive to take charge and get behind the wheel. So, that's all I had. It's just something that I was thinking about. Definitely let me know what you think. I think it's important for us to kind of rethink the narratives and the story of what's happening in tech right now. Like we should definitely kind of challenge some of these narratives, at least the best we can. And then that was just one that was circulating in my mind and I just knew was off, and it didn't quite sit well with me. So I had to just kind of get my thoughts out there and talk about why I thought it was kind of like a bunch of nonsense. But yep, let me know what you think. I'm gonna go ahead and head out. Gotta make dinner.